welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Forest podcast, a Puerto Rican podcast about Star Wars and other nerd related media. Today, we're on our ACOLYTE Thursdays, which is not the most creative title, but a title nonetheless, talking about power and those who can wield it. Episode 3 of the ACOLYTE, Destiny. Joining us today to talk about this wonderful episode from the Geeky Waffle, Candace Kaw. Welcome to Triad of the Force. How's it going?
Thanks so much for having me.
It's definitely a joy to have you. I know that we have been chatting for a while about having you over. We were supposed to chat about Ahsoka a couple months ago, and then the strikes happened. So unfortunately, that we couldn't make that work out. But thankfully, we've had this wonderful opportunity with the Acolyte, which is probably, I think, a better show to discuss because there's so much more things that we can talk about, from diversity and inclusion to the plot to all the spicy takes online. It's definitely a smorgasbord of a show to be able to dissect and talk about together. But yeah, before we get going with Acolyte and Destiny, why don't we? You haven't been on the channel. We want to get to know you. We want everyone that's listening to get to know you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your Star Wars journey and how you got into being part of Geeky Waffle and what Geeky Waffle's about. I know it's a lot of questions, but yeah, why don't we get going with the story, with the journey, with the heroine's journey? Tell us about it.
I started as a Star Wars fan in 1997 when the special editions came to theaters. My dad took me to them. I thought, oh no, an old movie. I can take a nap during it. I'm a kid. I love naps.
Hmm.
I'm like, I'll humor him. Like, this is what a child's thinking. I'm like, my dad takes me to all the Disney movies. I'll go see this for him. And like the instant like Princess Leia's there and she's standing up to Darth Vader, who's like super scary, I
Hmm.
was hooked. I was like, I'm all in, all in.
Excellent. And so you have more of a traditional journey, I guess, with Star Wars, like a
Yeah,
lot
with
of
the
us
OG.
do with the OG. I know that when I was going through my Star Wars journey, there was during the prequel era, I was very excited for Episode 1 to come
Mhm.
out and all of that. But then I had like my lull, as some of us more cynical teenagers got into the whole prequels actually suck era and whatnot. Did you ever run into that, or were you always like, Star Wars ride or die?
I mean, Star Wars has always been a part of my life. And I did have a few moments, especially in Attack of the Clones, being like a preteen teen, where like Anakin's flirting with Padme and just getting secondhand embarrassment as
Mhm.
someone who was just starting to like think about
Yeah, but
dating,
we're
you
coming
know?
around
Yeah.
though.
Yeah. But like as you get older and you're like, he's 19. He's probably never talked to a girl he was like interested in before. You're like, I get it now. I get it now. But like, yeah.
I mean, and especially in, like, now that I'm in my 30s and having been in the dating world in the 30s, like, it doesn't get better.
Mhm.
Actually, it probably gets
No.
worse. So it's not that unrealistic, definitely, to think about it. But so how did you? I mean, obviously, Star Wars fans, as we all are. What was your journey from a Star Wars fan to all of a sudden be a Star Wars content creator and making Geeky Waffle? And I know Geeky Waffle has lots of different avenues, lots of
Yeah.
different fandoms that you guys engage with. But how did that, from going from fandom into content creation, go for you?
Well, I've been doing podcasting stuff since college for other publications and stuff like that.
Mm.
And the Geeky Waffle came about as someone who loves listening and hearing about fandom and nerddom and realizing there weren't that many women talking about it,
Hmm.
especially like I'm half Indian. My co-host who I originally started with is Persian.
Hmm.
And we just felt like our opinions were quite out there.
Hmm.
So that's why we started it.
How have you felt that then has, because fandom is complicated. It always has been. I mean, I don't think a lot of the things that are going on with fandom has been anything new. It just takes different flavors as the fandom evolves, social media evolves, the internet evolves, so on and so forth. But how have you felt that? Because we felt the same way, and that's why we started like our own little channel here. do you think that things have improved since you started Geeky Waffle in terms of how diversity and fandom has incorporated itself into the narrative, or do you think that things are a little more complicated than when it started? Like, how do you feel the landscape is nowadays?
I think it's a lot better. There's a lot more women-led podcasts out there, and I feel like how technology has evolved, it's given people who might not have always had the opportunity to voice their opinions. Now there's so many different avenues to go. So, gonna be those people on the side yelling, but there are more of us, is what I always like to say. There are more of us.
I think that's definitely true, and
Oh,
and at least for yeah, sorry.
oh, can I go? So I just went to the grocery store during my break today and I was wearing a Ray shirt.
Hmm.
And just this girl, she must have been like 19, 20. And she's like, I love your Ray shirt. I can't wait for the new movie. She's my girl. I'm like, she grew up with Ray.
Hmm. Hmm.
Ray is her girl. And I was like, yeah, it was so exciting. I was in London when it was announced and I got to see Daisy Ridley just like
Hmm. Right
on
there.
stage. And she was like, oh my God. And we just fangirled for a bit. And I'm just like, that's who like, nobody's gonna see my Ray shirt, hopefully in person,
Hmm.
and start giving me a rant about Ray. It's
Hopefully not. That would be weird
Yeah,
and
that would be weird.
and rude. But I know I totally agree on something that I was talking with some friends of mine because most of my friends here in Chicago are just normies. They don't engage with Star Wars to the level that I particularly do. But it's always fun to talk to them about it because it's a completely different perspective and the noise that they get from fandom is a completely different thing from us who are engaged in not just the fandom but also on social media, and it's something that they're not even aware of and their parents aren't
Yeah,
aware of and my parents aren't aware of. It's just like they just like Star Wars and they watch Star Wars and the new shows come out and they either like them or don't like them, but they move on with their lives. So I think it's always kind of important to contextualize, right, how the world of fandom that we engage with is definitely a silo because we're in the vacuum of social media and things get loud in there, but in the real world it's not really how it goes. And unfortunately social media, especially like YouTube and Twitter, just magnifies the negative, and I feel like people that are positive or at least neutral don't feel the need to engage with content. So it just kind of is this imbalance, right, of who appears to be louder and what group is larger than the other. uh, and I think Rotten Tomatoes, I mean, as crappy as that system is to know if something is good or not, is for Star Wars in particular, I think, a good barometer of how we're engaging with it. uh, I like to say that with Star Wars, if a show is rotten on Rotten Tomato, it must be doing something right because it's triggering the
yeah,
right part of the fan base. But
yeah. So, yeah, they just rate it. They don't it was already being disliked before it even came out. And I doubt that all those people got screeners from Disney or were
Mhm.
at the premiere and saw those episodes. So,
And that's a weird thing, right? I understand that sometimes you want to watch things, but at some point, it's what when do you stop watching something that makes you unhappy? That's the question that I have, and all of them just say that. Well, I just want Star Wars to be better, and I'm just like, but do you though? It's what's the end goal here? And I think that Acolyte is very interesting in that way because, like you said, a lot of them, if not most of them, didn't get screeners, didn't go to the premiere, didn't see the show beforehand, had only seen trailers if at all, and but they already had their mind up. So it's kind of like, well, if you already were saying that this is woke and go woke, go broke type of narrative, which is boring and trite at this point, then how are you coming into this show from a good faith perspective, right? Because there's a difference between not liking the show and then being vitriolic towards it. So I don't know what your perspective on Acolyte and some of that negative reaction has been so far.
and honestly, it's kind of insane. Like they're saying, like Leslie Headland doesn't know anything about Star Wars. This woman knows the expanded universe
Mhm,
really well. She is the most like passion. I feel like one of the most passionate Star Wars creators that we've had, other than obviously Dave, like
mhm.
making a show.
Right. And it's funny though because I think it's really interesting to hear her interviews, and I think her, like you said, besides Dave, is the person that is, because now, I mean, we love Obi Wan Kenobi. Deborah Chow is amazing, but when Deborah Chow
Yeah.
is talking about Obi Wan Kenobi, she's not talking about it with the depth of lore that Leslie has thus far. And she's kind of, it's funny because everything that she says is it's what most fandom always says that they want. And they have like a Jedi led show. Fine, it's not the old Republic, it's the High Republic, but it's basically the same thing. Jedi murder mystery, like all these things, dark Star Wars, mature Star Wars. So it's like all the buzzwords that they always have been saying since, I don't know, since Mandalorian came out, that they want in a Star Wars show, and somehow, because it's a woman making it, and it's a female-led cast and a diverse cast, and especially with this episode, which we'll talk about it more, somehow they don't connect the thing that they wanted to begin with. So I think it's really interesting, this whole vitriol that they've engineered specifically for this episode, because this is the episode that was supposed to destroy Star Wars and destroy the lore, and somehow, I want to know your opinion. Like, do you think that this episode destroyed Star Wars and destroyed Star Wars lore?
I think it
And if it
ended
did,
just
we
it.
can
I
just
think it just
wrap it up.
yeah, yes it did. Bye.
Yeah,
Slam down the laptop.
shut down the podcast. Yeah.
Shut it down. Um, no, I think it just enhanced it. And that's the great thing about the Force is there are things that we still don't know about it. It's the same thing like A New Hope. We didn't know the Force could move things.
Hmm.
Like that didn't happen until Empire Strikes Back. And I like the idea that it keeps going. And I love the idea that people other than just the Jedi
Hmm.
use the Force because it's supposed to be like surrounding everybody. So I love the witches. I love that little, like the Lasats have
Hmm.
their versions, and there's like these sects who have like this idea of the Force that isn't what the Jedi think,
Hmm.
and
And,
it makes sense to have.
and in terms of like, breaking lore, I mean, we, like you said, witches and like how they're connecting to the Force, and how it's something we've seen in Star Wars before. We've definitely seen that in Clone Wars with the Night Sisters of Dathomir,
Which
obviously.
George Lucas was working on. I don't
Which
know if
George,
anybody knows that,
and
right?
not just that, they were like, they appeared in the courtship of Princess Leia, so they were one of the first uh, Force
Ex-
users to appear in the expanded universe that these nerds, alleged nerds, love so much. So it's just like, it's there's precedent, in the EU, and there's precedent from George Lucas. So it's a baffling thing that, yeah, they're exploring new ideas from it, but in terms of the genesis of the lore, it's still very much rooted in the Star Wars mythos. And even from what Yoda said, like when Mother Anastasia is talking about the thread, she's basically using Yoda's words, right? Where she's saying how it binds everything together, and that's literally Yoda's speech in Empire Strikes Back. This energy surrounds and binds us. So it's like these concepts of how we're interpreting religions and the Force differently. But we get before we get like really really deep into Destiny, have you been reading High Republic books, or comic books? Like, what's your engagement so far with the High Republic?
I've just read completely phase one.
Okay,
I was very upset about Loden because he was my favorite from the very first book, and then
hell
I was
yeah.
like, but my absolute favorite is the Vernestra.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Which as which
my
is
girls like,
obviously in the show. So like, what do you? Yeah. So you've been reading the books for Phase One as Acolyte has been going on.
yeah. Well, I already read those.
Okay.
I
Okay.
read those a
Sorry.
while back. But yeah, Vernestra, my girl, what are you doing? She's like bureaucracy and everything.
Mm. So I think that's one of the interesting things, and I'm glad you touched on it, because I'm definitely want to like talk to a lot more High Republic fans to see how they feel about how Vernestra is characterized in the books. obviously she's extremely young in the books versus the Vanessa that we're getting in the show. So shit happens
Yeah,
in a couple hundred
oh,
years.
that girl, like, just in phase 1 had a lot of stuff happen to her,
Mm.
so I get it. She got trauma and everything like that, but, like, I was texting Arzu and I was just like, "What happened to my girl?" She's, like, so serious and so by the book, and it's just I wanna know, like, where her head is at, so I hope we get to see more of her.
I wonder because now with this episode that just came out, it's the one of the flashback scene which turned out to be an episode that everyone was like expecting based on the trailers. But there is like one snippet of Vernestra in those trailers where she's using the light whip, and she's in a forest. She's obviously with her mission robes, not the temple robes. So I wonder if one of the if in a future flashback she's actually in Brendock. Do you think that that snippet of her with the light whip is in Brendock in the past, or do you think it's like in the present day of the show?
I don't know. I always assumed it was in the present day, but now you got me thinking maybe Vernestra has some stuff to be guilty of too. Just
Just,
adding
just,
that to her trauma. Just add it
just
to her trauma.
because that's what I've been thinking about since since the show came out, and thinking about that scene specifically and what to expect in the future. It's just like maybe this is why she's more of a sudden more rigid and bureaucratic because of everything that went down. She's like, oh no, we gotta buckle up, Buttercup, and and not be as loosey goosey as we have been in the past. But that's all on the speculation and the things which we'll definitely get to in our responsible speculation segment. But before we we get to that, let's discuss the episode. What was your reaction to it? What were you expecting? Did it live up to either the negative hype or the positive hype? Like, what was your visceral reaction once you saw the episode?
Well, one thing I do is I never read reviews before I watch anything. I try not to get any feedback. I want to go into things completely unbiased. And I had issues with Disney Plus on my app on my TV, so I had to watch it on my iPad. So I was
Oh
already like
no.
really mad about that. But I was like, oh, this is happening. We're
Hmm.
getting representation on screen.
Hmm.
Like, that's amazing. And we're getting witches because that's my thing. It's like, I love the addition of the Death and More witches and Clone Wars.
Hmm.
And I thought it was a great episode, but I love the idea of non-linear storytelling in Star Wars because it's
Hmm.
not something that is quite done often, except you could argue like the originals and then the prequels and then the sequels is
Hmm.
kind of non-linear storytelling. But I also like that everything is from like a certain point of view,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is going to be really interesting. And I was kind of disappointed by a lot of people online who are like not understanding that there's more to this story. And
Right.
I'm wondering about people's media literacy. Maybe cut that. Um, that feels mean, but like,
but it's true though.
yeah, yeah. And it's just like, there's so much more to this. This is just
Mm-hmm.
like a taste of what happened that night. We don't know the whole story. We just know what now OSHA knows from that
Mm-hmm.
night.
Because
That's it.
and I want to latch on to that part you were saying. It's like it's a show, so that means that there's more episodes that will like Leslie Edlin says, an onion, it'll keep blooming and we'll see more layers to it. So I think it's a baffling take from people online to be, oh well, either we know everything or we don't know anything, or and it's like, yeah, that's the nature of shows. You kind of keep discovering it as you go, and to just think that in the third episode you're gonna just know everything already is kind of a disservice to yourself in terms of your curiosity and engagement with the story, because it's kind of supposed to be that way. You're supposed to discover it.
The the Jedi just happened to be on this planet during the time of the ceremony. And what were they doing this entire time?
Hmm.
How did they know to go into the temple when it was on fire? Were they right next door? Were they watching?
Hmm.
How did a fire kill all those witches? I don't think that's how it works. They were like in a circle. And then the mother was
And not burned.
No, and even smoke inhalation wouldn't do that so quickly
Mhm.
that they it's like they didn't have a chance to get out.
It's yeah, there's a lot of it that I think it's interesting. I think one of the cool things that the show this episode did well, one thing I thought that was really cool about the previous two episodes is that you have like the double title, right? Lost and Found, and I forgot the name of the other episode, but it's like the
Justice Revenge.
thank you, Justice Revenge, and like the double titles. But then this one, I was expecting right a double
Yeah,
title as
same.
well. But
I
all of a
thought that
sudden,
was
we get the single word, which I think is definitely a clue to what a lot of us are speculating on, which is like this is not a flashback. This is a memory, and it's definitely Osha's memory. And I think that was one of the clever things in the titling of the episode. It's like, well, it's her point of view, so it's only one word because it's her
or
her point of view. Yeah.
or is it 2 as 1 because she's with May in that part of the story?
I think that's valid because a lot of this I know it's twins, right? And it's like
Yeah.
they're the two of their story, but it's also really I think, especially from what I've read from Leslie's work and whatnot, it's really about dualities within. So yeah, we're presenting two characters, but it's really the story of all of us and like the binaries within us all and how they're always in conflict with each other. She just kind of like made those conflicts within each other just instead of one person dealing with this
Yeah.
a dual consciousness, which I think is a really interesting thing, especially with the chant that the witches do of the power of one, the power of two, and the power of many, which I think is a really, really clever thing. But definitely, I mean, in my opinion, Osha's memory. What do you think? Do you think it's definitely Osha's memory, or do you think it's just a flashback of what happened in the episode? I mean, in the past.
I think it's what happened, but from Osha's point of view.
Hmm.
I don't believe there's a scene without her in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
There is a moment when her mothers are talking kind of off, but she's still there. She's in the background. So it's still like following Osha.
Hmm.
And I think we might get it like next episode might even or maybe a later episode is going to be from the point of view of the Jedi,
Yeah.
especially from what we've seen in the trailers. Like it looks like they at least like I'm judging by like Torben's how young he looks
Right.
in some of those scenes.
Rough 16 years.
Yeah,
Let's get
that's
that
the
out of the way.
tweet that went viral for me of all
It,
the tweets I made about it. And
I
people
mean,
are yelling at me and they're like, sometimes people age like that. And I'm just like,
damn,
he's
with
in his
16
30s
years.
still.
Yeah.
He's in his 30s still, probably. He's probably only 32.
Like Obi-Wan gets a pass because he's in the desert and the
He's got
skincare.
2 sons.
Yeah, the skincare routine in the desert is probably not great, under a lot of stress. But
He's
homeboy,
working out in the sun, they
homeboy's
care.
inside his temple. He's fine. He's got that Coruscant moisturizer somewhere. So it's rough. And then he got that discount Crix Maydeen beard. Not going well for him. So that means that whatever happened in Brendock must have been a a doozy. I totally lost
I
my
was gonna
train of
make a
thought.
really bad joke.
No,
I was
please
gonna
do,
make
please do.
no wonder he took the poison.
I don't disagree because hey,
Well,
I think about that every day. It's like, what if I start looking like that? What I don't know, and I don't want to think of that. But
an angry
poor,
witch just puts down a potion for you, but like
it's
but
over.
no,
It's
something
game over. Yeah.
something definitely happened to him. Like we see him in when Osha wakes up
Hmm.
after they
In the
escaped.
background,
In
blurry.
the background, his eye is
Mm.
that's when he loosed his eye. And I there's gotta be a reason someone takes a decade-long meditation.
Yeah. Eh, but that's one of the I mean, it's a dual the double edged sword of kind of figuring out what's gonna happen because one we read the Hetland interviews and two we dissect trailers, unfortunately. Which
Yeah.
now in retrospect, I kind of wish I hadn't because I want to, be more surprised
Yeah.
for what's coming next. But whatever. I saw it and I read the interviews, and we know that Leslie has mentioned that the show is influenced by Rashomon. And for those who don't know, Akira Kurosawa film. Akira Kurosawa, one of the biggest influences on George Lucas with The Hidden Fortress for A New Hope, and Rashomon is a film about points of view and what is the truth and how we always want to portray ourselves as a hero in our own narrative. And it's a film that's also used as a reference for The Last Jedi with all the flashbacks that Ray not Ray, sorry, that Ben and Luke are telling Ray about what happened at the temple to great effect. I really love those sequences. And by Leslie kind of saying that that film's an influence, and with this memory now playing out, it's kind of confirmed, right? That we're gonna see the different versions of this. Maybe not in full episode lengths because we need to also move the plot A forward, but important, right? To see how then this memory kind of is the confirmation of everything we know thus far, which is kind of why to me it's implied that we'll see the next points of views to see how either that narrative is uh, contradicted, uh, supplemented, or and then what what's the truth at the end of it. So uh, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of other things
Yeah.
that we can speculate, but yeah, tell me your thoughts about the Rashomon memories and what we can uh, hope to see.
Yeah, just for a more modern example for your listeners, Fiction is a
Hmm.
really good example of how it's also like people remember certain details more than other people because that's important to them. Or again, like you were saying, how what light they see themselves in.
Hmm.
And I feel like the OSHA last episode was like from a child's point of view.
Hmm.
And be interesting to see it from a grown-up's like souls.
And I definitely think we'll see Saul because I think while I'm on the Soul Patrol and and
Mhm.
we love Saul and Saul is I think one of the I mean I love Qui Gon Jinn growing up. That was my favorite
Yeah.
Jedi as a kid, and Saul definitely has that Qui Gon energy to him. But it's interesting because it's a Qui Gon that carries the darkness because when he's talking about May in the previous two episodes, or when he's talking to Osha, you can always tell that there's some guilt and no one's guilty because they're because they didn't do anything. Everyone's guilty because they regret something in the past. So in seeing that the memory of and destiny and seeing because to me the while everyone has been saying that the Jedi are portrayed in a negative light, and I agree to an extent. They are, we kind of see a darker side of how the Jedi can be received by this group of witches. To me, it's still a very charitable portrayal of the Jedi because they're still kind of a quote unquote savior to Osha because she wants to join them. She's sketching the Jedi icon in her triangle notebook, which is amazing. Disney should just make that, so we can just buy them.
Waiting for that at
Uh,
Galaxy's Edge,
Right.
right?
Please just do it before I do it. Set up an Etsy store. But then yeah, goes to Kelnaka and Kelnaka's kind to her and she has like that whole great exchange with Saul and he rescues her. So it's still while they're portrayed kind of dark and how they approach the witches, it's still shareable in the sense that they're still a hero to her, right? They rescue her and she joins them. She wants to join them. Uh, what do you think about that? Do you think the Jedi were portrayed in a more positive light, or do you think that I'm off base here, and they were actually kind of like the antagonist of this memory.
I think they do bring some colonizer vibes to
Yes.
just, as someone who extended family, I from India, you're
Hmm.
kind of like on the watch out for the colonizer vibes. And them coming and saying what people can't do with their children was kind
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
little iffy for me. And then them being like, well, we're gonna take the kids. And I
Hmm.
understand the idea of Jedi wanting to take the children because they have the Force, and sometimes when you can't control the Force, like accidents can happen and things like that. But it seems like there was a different way of controlling the Force that the witches obviously knew how to do.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like how trying to tell someone how to raise their children.
Yeah, it's it's a low hanging fruit, right? For Jedi, so it's like, oh, it's Jedi kidnap children, which I mean, there's nuance to that, but I think it's definitely hammered home in this episode because it's definitely that. And like Mother Anastasia said, right? It's just like Brendok is not Republic territory. So
Yeah, that was the colonizer thing that was the mo
why are you even here, right? But then I think the disturbing, well, not disturbing part. Well, like yeah, sure, disturbing because we're told that it's the Jedi High Republic, the Jedi at the height of their goodness or or the best that they can be in this era. But then when Indara comes in, she's just like, oh, the Republic says in their, they're not representing themselves as, these forces of light. They're portraying themselves as emissaries of the government, which kind of
Yeah.
a red flag, right? Especially because they have to break into their stronghold.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
just
not
like,
great, Jedi.
and,
But
and
that
this is
kind of
and this
like
is their good version, because I'm sure in May's version of the story, if we get it, which I think we will, it'll be much more sinister.
yeah, they'll come out like lightsabers blazing,
Hmm.
everything like that. But yeah, I feel like it's the Jedi as an organization, not the best, but there are some really good people in the organization, like Soul,
Hmm.
who like asked Osha, like, what do you want?
Hmm.
Which I think was important. She just wanted to have other children around her, which I felt so heartbreaking. She's like, there's other kids.
It's always a weird thing though, because like you mentioned, it's the prism of real life and religion, and for me, it's one of those weird things. Like I'm very on unreligious and anti-religious establishment, and especially because a lot of Christian religions, force children to, well, not force, encourage parents to baptize children before they have the right to choose what they believe, and
Before they
it,
can
it
speak or walk,
before they can
really.
speak or walk. And so for me, that's the parallel with the Jedi. You're taking children that really don't know. They're still in the developmental stage, trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, what they want for themselves, what they think they want because their parent told them, which is kind of May's perspective. Like, she wants to be a witch because her mom is telling her that she wants to do that. So like it's those. And I'm not saying don't listen to kids and what they want. I'm just saying that it's kind of weird to, because he's gaslighting her in a way, right? He's,
Oh
well,
yeah,
there's
no,
there's kids here. You want to be with kids, so maybe join our, our religious order. So for me, that's kind of a
yeah.
odd thing. How do you see it?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to be like, okay, what 8-year-old knows what they want to do for the rest of their lives?
Hmm. Hmm.
And they don't have really, they do have a choice to change because obviously Osha left, but
Hmm.
it's very, I feel like it must be like leaving a cult, like not understanding how the world works at all.
Hmm. But it's that I'm almost losing my thread. But it's not kind of that same thing. It's not like asking a kid, "Hey, you want to do summer camp this summer? Do you want to do basketball or do you want to do soccer? Maybe." I mean, those are, I think, safe decisions for
But they will change their
children to
minds in
take.
the middle of that,
Exactly. But
honestly.
like you said, it's not like, hey, leave your family forever and then join this religious organization where we're gonna send you to space battles. It's definitely a tricky thing. But on the flip side of that, I also think that it's interesting how May and the rest of the witches are organized, because then it's kind of it's the flip side of it. It's like, oh, I'm engaging with these cultural things and these things that my society wants because it's what's expected of me. And I think that's also, in a way, better, right? Because you're engaging with people that love you and a culture that is your own. But it's also a thing of being forced upon you. Do you think that there's a similarity or a contrast there, or what do you think with how May is engaging with her mom and the witch clan?
I think it's similar in a way because it's like one way or another. There's these only 2 options now for this little girl, which really sucks,
Hmm.
is either you become a witch or you become a Jedi.
Hmm.
There's no like, "What if I wanna be a painter?" And, just, like, go off in the galaxy or anything like that. But it is different because, again, she is her mother. She is
Hmm.
raising her, and it's just hard to say. I'm interested to see what else we find out about Osha and her family.
And to Mother Anastasia, I hope I'm saying it right. Mother Anastasia's credit, she is kind of being open and accepting and giving
She
to
listens to
both
her.
of them. She's listening to. I mean, there's the elder mother that's just like, make them lie, and it's like, ooh, okay, I get it, but I get it, but you kind of undermine the whole let them choose thing. Uh, but in that way, I think it's healthy, right? Because it's like just you may want a thing for them, but ultimately it should be up to them if they want to do the thing or not. Um, but one of the interesting things about Mother Anastasia and her relationship to Osha and May is their maternal relationship. It's not only that she's the matriarch and mother of this coven, but she's also apparently their mother in more ways than one because she made them, and we'll discuss what that means for them. But and I forget the mother Sabrak's name, and she carried them, so they're actually literally like this couple's children. So, what did you think of that? What was this a shock? Did you expect Mother Anastasia to actually be their mother? Do you what was your whole thought process with that whole revelation, if it was a revelation?
I mean, I thought she was at least like their adopted mother, if not their
Mhm,
mother. And honestly, I was like, okay, they're hinting at something with these two.
mhm,
But then when they like outright said, like, she created him, she carried them,
mhm.
they're in a relationship. And I'm like, because usually Disney and Star Wars tiptoes on these things on screen.
It's still kind of tiptoed because they didn't formally say like, "Hey, we kind of dig each other." They were still like, "Well, like Disney could still get
But it
away
was
with
the
it."
most. It
It
was the
is
most
true.
we got.
Agreed. Agreed.
The
Agreed.
most we ever got. And, happy Pride Month, everybody.
Happy Pride Month to everybody. According to Leslie and Amandla, this is the gayest Star Wars, and we're here for it. We
Yeah, which actually is not
we love
saying
to see it.
much,
It's
honestly.
it's not. It's not. It's yeah. Especially for High Republic, it could go even further. I mean, there's still the rest of the show to go. Who knows? Hey, who
Mhm,
knows what surprises are there for us? But I think the interesting thing about this, though, is not that they're kind of biological children, right? They're technically a virgins in the Force, and obviously there's the double parallel between Luke and Leia being, twins of the Force from Padme and Anakin, and obviously the virgins of Anakin. But where the difference is, and here's my interpretation of it, and I want to see how you were seeing it in the which book was it? Master and Apprentice. Qui-Gon and Count Dooku are obsessed with prophecies, especially the prophecy of the Chosen One, and so we know that that's a thing that's been going on in the Jedi
mhm.
Order for a while. So I wonder then if that's one of the reasons that the Jedi are trying to get to this coven because they're aware of the prophecy. They've heard of these virgins in the Force from them, and they're like, we gotta figure out if this is the chosen one because if it is, those kids need to be with the Jedi Order. What did you think of the revelation that this was actually a virgins, or is it a virgin? I don't
I
know. I'm interpreting
I don't
as
know.
such.
I don't know. I don't know if it's just, like, witch magic or anything like that, but
Because Anastasia said it was unnatural.
yeah. Which reminds me of Palpatine
Hmm.
talking about Dark Plagueis, saying, like,
Exactly.
things that consider unnatural. I think it was Brad who said this about how are May and Osha, like, the dark twins
Hmm.
of, like, the
Hmm.
dark side because they are, like, the unnatural version of,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
what Plagueis and everything was talking about. And are Luke and Leia, like, the answer to that, like, the light
Hmm.
side, which I would find interesting. But I don't it's so difficult to be like, what is the dark side? What is the light side?
Hmm.
And I don't know. I honestly don't know, which I'm so excited about not knowing and not having like a definite theory about because I don't want to figure everything out.
Right. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I'd rather yeah, be.
I want to be surprised.
I like to be wrong. Sometimes it's like, oh, that's far more clever than anything I could have ever come up with. But it's definitely an interesting concept because it's not light-handed. It's pretty heavy-handed. The parallels that like Leslie's doing, right, with the Skywalkers and the original and prequel trilogies, and even the sequel trilogy, right? Because it's powerful light, powerful dark, and like this dyad in the Force, and now we
Dyads,
have
yeah.
Osha and May, and maybe, and people are already saying that it is a dyad. I don't know, but maybe it could be a dyad in the Force because clearly one twin leans towards one side and the other one towards the other. Does that necessarily mean that's a dyad? I don't know. Will we even? I think it would be kind of cool to hear that phrase from the sequel trilogy in this High Republic show to kind of tie all the eras together. But it's a mystery. It's a mystery for now. Uh, but what the hell was I gonna say? Virgins in the Force and the chosen one prophecy, and I think that's the interesting thing because then it ties even deeper into the High Republic books. Because in the comic books for Phase Two, and I don't want to go into spoiler territory so that you can enjoy those comic books, but the Jedi kind of start positioning themselves in a similar role with what's called the convocation of the Force. So it's kind of interesting, and I don't know if it's purposeful or not, right? From Leslie's writing that just happened to tie thematically into what was happening with the High Republic books and comics, or if it's kind of the story group being like, hey, now that you're doing that, maybe it can piggyback onto this other thing that's happening in publishing. But speaking of publishing, do you feel that so far High Republic publishing has connected as much as necessary to the Acolyte, because we have the Barrage Vow, obviously Golden Robes, Jedi Vectors, Vernestra, most important of all. So, do you think that that has been successful in tying these, these books that so much of the fandom has enjoyed with this show that's supposed to have massive appeal to anybody and everybody that hasn't read those books?
Yeah, I feel like it's done a very good job of including those things, but not making it so that it's required reading, which is very important when you have TV and movies.
Hmm.
That, not everybody's gonna read these books, which, I mean, they should, but they're not going to. There's a lot of just general Star Wars fans, and nobody's texted me asking me questions about this show, which means it's doing a good job, because usually after Solo, when Darth Maul came up,
Wasn't he
I got
dead? Nah.
I had so many text messages because I'm the Star Wars friend.
Hmm.
I'm the
Yep.
Star Wars. So,
Yeah.
I think it's doing a good job.
With Solo, same thing happened. I was watching it with my dad, and when that happened, he just looks at me. He's like, Didn't he die?" And it's like, "Here we go." It's like, "No, because in the animated show," and then let's go into the diatribe, and he's like, "Oh, oh, okay." And I think that's the point too, because it to compare it to another Disney property, like right, Marvel I mean, obviously Marvel also has like published side to it, but with the MCU, so many shows and so many films that at some point it kind of started becoming a homework to be able to understand lots of the, a lot of the missing pieces that a show has or a movie is missing so that you can connect everything. And I think in that regard, Star Wars and Lucasfilm have been doing a better job of making sure that if you know, you know, and if you're reading everything, it amplifies the experience, but you don't need to. And I think that's one of the really cool things so far, and why I'm really looking forward to that Kelnaka one shot to be able to be like, oh, now we got the Acolyte comic book, but it's a High Republic comic book. So really excited to see what characters from High Republic Publishing come into that comic book. Hopefully, Burry. Um, but yeah, we've been insinuating a lot about the future memories that we might see and what other perspectives the show will take. So let's get into a little bit of responsible speculation in that regard. We've talked about a couple of other points of view, May's, Soul's, and for me, like the ultimate one, which is truth, right? Which I think is going to be the last thing that we'll see. But what are your expectations about what memories we'll see and what we can see in them?
I think the secret dark people are calling him Teeth because he doesn't have a name yet, and you just see those teeth on the helmet.
Mhm.
I think he definitely has something to do with this because just the
Mm.
Jedi being there, and I don't think May did that,
Mhm.
obviously. Like it, and again, they didn't pass away because of a fire.
Mhm.
There was something definitely, there's something, and I don't want to go off what I've seen in trailers, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I totally didn't even think of Darth Teeth and how they plug into to the memory because yeah, I always like in my mind I've been isolating them, right? It's just Darth Teeth is the present timeline, and the past is the past. But that could be interesting to see, like how they could plug
Because like
in some way for sure. Because that's my wild, my wild card theory that I have for episode one is that, spoiler alert. I mean, if you're watching this episode or listening to this episode, you hopefully saw one and two. But spoiler alert: Indara dies in the opening scene of episode one. But I was thinking that that was going to happen, but then my wild card theory is that she's Darth Teeth, because for me, it's one of those things where, like, you don't cast Carrie Ann Moss to be Space Wizard Trinity if you don't want people to think that she's Space Wizard Trinity. So it's kind of a thing of pulling the wool from under, from under us, and be like, okay, this is what you think you're getting, but twist, it's a completely different thing. But at this point, I feel like that's not gonna happen, because I think that's gonna weaken some of the story elements that have happened so far. But I think definitely what I'm looking forward to seeing is what's the darkness that the Jedi did that night in Brendok, because as we've been saying, we don't know how the fire spread, and we when we see the coven and they're all when they're all passed, they don't look like burned, charred bodies from a massive fire like Soul was claiming. It kind of looked like they unalived themselves, and I think it's one of the things from comparing it to cults and things that cults do. But then the opening of the episode with the yellow tree, and I forgot the name of the tree. I think it's the bunta tree, but it's the same tree that does the poison that then Kimir, hope I said the name right. I'm horrible with names. Uses in episode two. So it's just like, so we know that that tree can make the poison, and you don't set that up to not pay it off. So like, what might have happened there that would have triggered something like that? And I think I'm looking forward to it. Not because I'm sadistic, but because it's really exciting to see a direction to Star Wars that isn't necessarily seen. I mean, yeah, we saw darkness with Andor, but I think this is a new scope, right? Because it's darkness for the Jedi, and the Jedi, while we saw their fall in the prequels, is not this sinister side of them that is being presented right now. But besides memories and besides the past, what are you looking forward to the most for the Acolyte as we move forward now to episode four and beyond?
more Yord, like
Yord
need
Horde, yes, yes.
Your horde over here. I'm interested to see how he goes through this journey, finding out like the Jedi aren't always right
Hmm.
and what that does to him because he seems very much like the by the book dude and is like, is his world, well, galaxy view gonna change? And I want to have like Osha and see, hopefully Osha and May like have a conversation
Hmm.
more so than what they did before.
The Yord Horde has been like a fascinating phenomenon to me, because that's not the from seeing the first two episodes, that's not the character that I would have said this is the one that social media is going to latch onto. Didn't see that coming, but it's so refreshing. And to quote Alex from Star Wars Explained, it's a lot of joy scrolling on Twitter and Threads and seeing all the love that this character has generated online. But also, I have to give kudos to the Star Wars marketing team for latching onto the hashtag and immediately
Hmm.
releasing that video of the Yord Horde, and having the actor, terrible with names, I forgot his name, I apologize, but
Charlie
it's Charlie, like
Burnett.
having the stickers and mailing them to all the most prominent Yord Horde members online. I think it's spectacular. So while I know that we talked at the beginning of the episode about a lot of negative aspects of fandom and how they've come at the show, I think it's more important, right, to highlight the love that the show is getting, because I've seen this a lot more for Acolyte than I have for any show in a while. It's like seeing so much positivity and so much love for all the characters, and Soul Patrol. You have the Yord Horde, Maze Base. You have so many fandoms within the Acolyte that are forming. That is really nice to see. Like, what has been your experience with the fandom and the Acolyte?
Well, I think one of the reasons is changed. One, it's a great show, Two, it's on at 9 p.m. Eastern now,
Yes.
and it's not during a strike because Ahsoka started doing that.
Hmm.
And I feel like it has that experience of back in the day when we would watch stuff on network TV and everyone
Yep.
would watch it at the same time. So we were all like kind of experiencing it together, at least
It's a
us
good
on the
point.
America. So I think that helps, especially with Twitter and
Hmm.
social media. Star Wars replied to some of my one of my your horde memes. I was very proud of that.
Good.
I was like,
Congratulations.
I know. I was like, thank you, Star Wars, for like approving this Yord
Hmm.
meme. And I really do appreciate them embracing like the fandom aspect of Star Wars,
Yeah.
which is just such a big part of it.
I mean, the biggest, right? Because like if they're the fans
Yeah,
weren't
if we
here,
weren't
there would be
here, yeah.
there'd be no Star Wars. But that's interesting. Was Ahsoka the first
Hmm.
Star Wars show to like air prime time, basically?
I believe so. Yeah,
I didn't see that now.
because
I got used
Mandalorian
to it
season,
now, so I'm just like,
yeah,
yeah, it's always been that
Mandalorian,
way.
Mandalorian season 3 was at um
Midnight Pacific, probably.
midnight. Yeah, it's at 3 a.m.
I'm just like not doing that. I like sleep way too much. To
No, I would just try
do
to
that.
watch it during my lunch break.
Yeah, I would try to wake up early, but I'm not an early riser,
No,
so I'm
no, me
definitely
either.
definitely thankful. And honestly, they should just keep doing this for all those shows, and they probably have for for Loki, right? I would assume that all
Yeah, they did it
all the MCU
Marvel
stuff is
stuff.
also okay. Well, that's good, and it's
They
definitely
didn't do it for
healthy.
Bad Batch, but
Because
it's just meta ba
because
animation.
animation. They just like
Yeah.
yeah, just put that out. I mean, but thankfully they did put out like Bad Batch week by week, so that we could still engage with it,
Yes.
as opposed to Tales of. Oh, I forgive Tales of the Empire. I guess that's so short. That's
Yeah,
just like
it needs to be
there
all
you go.
together.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we could be discuss. There's so much to dissect with these episodes. That's like too much, and we can be talking forever, as Star Wars fans could. But I think for now, I think this is a good moment to wrap everything up. But before we go, Candace, why don't you tell us what's going on with you and Geeky Waffle, and anything that you might want to talk about what people can expect from you and some of your channels moving forward.
Yeah, Geeky Waffle, we are trying to get our YouTube more active. We recently became partners,
Congratulations!
so
I saw that. Congratulations.
getting the monies.
Hell yeah.
Um, I'll be a panelist in San Diego Comic-Con next month,
Oh,
which is
cool.
so
Very cool.
exciting. My first Comic-Con too. I will also be at Dragon Con, which
Good. I'll be there as well.
awesome. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
hang out. Let's do some Star Wars stuff.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very excited for the con life. We're currently in our hot Muppet summer, which is
Okay.
what we're calling it for the Geeky Waffle. We're just rewatching and talking about Muppet projects.
So I imagine that you guys were watching the Jim Henson documentary that just came out.
Yeah, that's how it got. That's how it was like getting hyped for the documentary, and then I'm like, I'm gonna watch all the Muppet stuff I can.
Awesome.
And Muppets have such a strong connection with Star Wars.
Very much the Frank Oz, baby. Yeah. Is the panel that you're doing for SDCC public, or is that still top secret? Can you tell everybody what you're going to be talking about?
I don't know. Since I
Let's,
don't know,
let's
I'm
err
not
on
gonna
the
say
side of
anything
caution.
yet.
Err on the
Yeah.
side of caution. But yeah, for
Yeah,
everyone
but
that's listening,
it'll
just
be
make
on my
sure that,
Twitter. It'll
yeah.
be on my Twitter when everything's definite. But yeah.
And we'll be leaving links and down in the description below, so you can follow Candace and Geeky Waffle and all that good stuff, so that you guys can follow and make sure that it's great content, great people over there, and we have to support diverse creators, because we're together we're much stronger, and we can achieve our mission of having like all of our voices at equal standing with some of those more toxic ones. But thank you again, Candace, for joining us. It's been a wonderful discussion. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what everyone else has to say about this episode and the Acolyte moving forward. But with that, we have been Triad of the Force. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like this video and this podcast and all the other content we have created, please make sure to share, like, subscribe, leave a review, do all those things that supposedly boost the engagement and boost content. But with that, we usually say, may the force be with you. But since we are in Acolyte season and High Republic season, for light and life, thanks, everybody.